Shooting collar locator rebuild, redress. Procedures 3 and an 8 Titan shooting CCL. Proper servicing requires disassembly of the CCL into its component parts. The disassembly shown in here is required for normal servicing when the CCL magnetic coil, diode assembly and quick change are in good conditions. At this point of disassembly, inspect the CCL magnetic coil, diode assembly and verify that all connections and components are tight. Free of corrosion, and electrically test the CCL magnet, diode coil assembly. Clean and inspect the components prior to reassembly. Inspect all threads, O-ring grooves, and sealing surfaces. Replace and lubricate all O-rings prior to reassembly. If the components pass inspection, proceed to reassembly. Otherwise, disassemble and repair the coil, magnetic diode assembly prior. Disassembly instructions. 1. Clamp the body of the CCL in a vise and remove the quick change by rotating it counterclockwise. The quick change set screw in the lower sub must be removed prior to loosening the quick change. Clean all components and set aside a fin. Remove the top and bottom subs. Both subs unscrew counterclockwise and set aside. 3. Slide the CCL coil, magnet, diode assembly out of the body and set body aside. If the CCL magnetic coil, diode assembly is clean and passes electrical testing, reassemble the CCL and perform the final checks prior to placing the CCL in service. Further disassembly is required. If a problem with the coil wire, diode, magnets, or contact rod is found, the CCL should be completely disassembled if evidence is found that the CCL has been wet or shows evidence of corrosion. Rewrap the coil with temp tape if the existing tape is in poor condition. CCL magnet, coil, diode assembly. Note: some versions of 3¼ inches Titan CCLs use an integral, one-piece rubber shock mount. Magnet retainer top subs do not use the single spring diodes that are standard in these models under high temperature use. The rubber subs will grip the diode, and when the rubber expands, the diode will lose contact with the contact rod. Replace the large diameter single spring diode with a smaller diameter double spring diode. Some CCLs utilize a spring-loaded button in the coil housing for ground on these CCLs. The coil housing should be machined to accept the spring ground shown. CCL magnet, coil, diode disassembly. CCL magnet, coil, diode initial disassembly. CCL magnet, diode, coil disassembly. Lower CCL magnetic coil, diode assembly detail. CCL magnet, coil, diode disassembly instructions. Using a regular screwdriver, remove the upper retaining screw and the coil wire retaining screw from the contact button by rotating the screws counterclockwise. Remove the coil wire contact button and diode from the upper magnet retainer. Clean the diode and upper contact button and set aside. Remove the contact rod by inserting a nut driver through the top magnet retainer and rotating the contact rod nut counterclockwise, while holding the lower contact rod nut with a large regular screwdriver. Remove the lower contact rod nut and insulator. Clean and set aside. The contact rod will now slide out from the top of the CCL. Verify that the Teflon insulator tube and washer are removed with the rod. Remove the upper insulator, clean the components, and set the components aside. If necessary, clamp the CCL in a vise, making sure not to damage the coil wire, or ground clips, and loosen the top and bottom magnet retainers. By rotating the retainers counterclockwise, remove the magnet retainers, clean, and set aside. Remove the magnet covers. By rotating the covers in a counterclockwise direction, clean the magnet covers and set aside. If the CCL has not been previously disassembled, the magnets may be held in place by adhesive. The magnets do not need to be removed unless the coil needs to be serviced or rewound. If the magnets are to be removed, mark the magnets so that they can be reassembled on the correct side of the coil, with the proper orientation of the poles to the coil. If orientation has been lost, place the magnets so that they are repelling each other. If the magnets are installed incorrectly, the CCL will not function. Test and inspect the coil. Make sure that the meter is set on the appropriate scale 20K. Hold or attach meter leads to chassis ground and coil wire. Verify proper meter reading. The coil should read approx 1.5K for a 3 1/8 or 3 1/4 CCL. Verify that the correct meter scale K is visible in the lower right of the display stroke collar and verify meter deflection. CCL magnet, coil, diode reassembly. Clean the magnet coil assembly, remove any scale, rust, or corrosion. Verify that the ground clips are tight and free of corrosion. Inspect the coil for evidence of corrosion and rewrap the coil with heat tape if necessary. Do not damage the coil while cleaning the assembly. Apply Loctite to the threads of the magnet covers during installation. If the magnets have been removed, apply Loctite to the mating surfaces of the magnets and coil assembly. Reassembly instructions. Apply Loctite to the threads of the magnet cover threads and install the magnet covers. By rotating in a clockwise direction, the cover should be snug but not excessively tight. Apply Loctite to the magnet retainers and install the magnet retainers by rotating the retainers in a clockwise direction. The retainers should be snug but not excessively tight. Slide the lower insulator and lower contact rod nut into the lower magnet retainer with the washer and Teflon insulation tube on the contact rod. Slide the contact rod into the CCL assembly through the top magnet retainer. Tighten the contact rod by rotating the through rod clockwise with a nut driver and holding the lower contact rod nut with a large regular screwdriver. Slide the upper insulator into the upper magnet retainer. Install the double spring double diode in the upper magnet retainer. Install the upper contact button and retaining screw. Attach the coil wire to the upper contact button with the coil wire retaining screw. Hold the coil wire in place with wax string to prevent damage during reassembly. Installation of the upper insulator into the upper magnet retainer. Note upper contact retainer hole. Upper insulator installation. Slide the double spring diode into the upper magnet retainer A. Slide the upper contact button into the upper magnet retainer B. Press and hold the contact button in while installing the upper contact button retainer screw and coil retainer screw. Installing the upper insulator, diode, and upper contact button. Place the coil wire into the recess in the top magnet retainer and hold it in place with wax string to avoid pinching the wire during reassembly. CCLs with solid rubber magnet retainers will have the coil wire completely within the magnet retainer, and this step is not required.